welcome everybody. Here we are. This is David, and I'm in conversation with Leor Roseman and Sami Awad. We're about to dive into, a very important conversation, I feel. I'd love to welcome you both. So Leor, Shalom Aleichem, and Sami, Salam Alaikum. How are you, brothers?
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for saying yes, honestly. It was a bit of a long shot, and because there's a lot of emotions right now. So I just honor you both for saying yes and being here, first of all. Let's just have you tell folks a wee bit about yourself. Sami, would you like to just introduce yourself and your work and your mission in life?
Yeah. So my name is Sami Awad. I'm a Palestinian, and I'd like to introduce myself as a Palestinian peace and nonviolent activist. I grew up in a family, I was born in a family that has always been committed to peace and justice and reconciliation in this land, very much influenced by an uncle who was even at one point known as the Gandhi of Palestine because of his work in nonviolent resistance and activism. And then through him, I dedicated my life to studying, engaging in nonviolent resistance and activism, and trying to find what is the best way to achieve real peace and real justice and real equality in this land that has, for centuries, not just decades, suffered a lot of violence and a lot of bloodshed. So my life's journey is to see how we could bring real peace to this land that many of us actually call Holy Land.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sami. Leor, welcome.
Hey, a pleasure to be here. I'm a psychedelic researcher. I'm also a senior lecturer in the University of Exeter in the UK. I've been working in Imperial College London for 10 years, and I moved recently to Exeter. And I'm a neuroscientist by training, but I'm also did studies in clinical research and psychedelic therapy, psychedelic neuroscience, and then studying groups of psychedelic rituals, retreats, and so on. And then kind of expanding and studying the political, socio-political realm in rituals of Israelis and Palestinians. So I guess I got a diverse disciplinary background in neuroscience, and it's constantly expanded from this kind of biology to the more bigger socio-political questions.
Yeah, and one thing we're going to talk about is Ripples, your new organization. Looks beautiful. I'm really, really excited and think it's going to do some beautiful work around the world. But we're going to be talking a lot about Israel and Palestine, particularly just on a lived experience level, the human beings that live here. And I love what you said, Sami, about the land. Like, we both live in this land. Leor, you're from this land. It's beautiful. It is holy, and we all love it. And maybe as a starting place, let's just check in. How it's hard to put into words, perhaps, and there's so much, and it's over the last 5 months, so much has happened. But can we hear about some of the experiences of your last 5 months of life, and anything that you currently hold hope in, and that gives you kind of hope and meaning for what comes next? Leor, would you like to go first?
Sure, yeah. So it's challenging times, and I guess the project we are doing together, there's a lot of hope in it and a lot of excitement in it, and the processes that we've been through or that we studied are very powerful. But then hitting like reality so hard and having so many strong forces around that are violent, and seeing all the pain and all the madness and all the violence, and the cycle of violence, and how people get stuck in that is also a place right now for me of some despair. And I feel that in the last few months, I'm fluctuating between despair, confusion, anger, kind of a wanting to disengage at one side, and the other side very motivated, very kind of, okay, now it's the time to do the work, now it's the time to continue, right? So there's two parts of me right now in the last few months that are fluctuating. There's a general state of confusion. There's also a bit of a state of feeling as a peace activist as well, feeling a bit oppressed, as if our voices are weaker right now. It's harder to speak them proudly. So it's kind of like needs to silence myself a bit more. There's that feeling. Uh, but what gives me hope, I think, is whenever I'm in a personal interaction with people that I love and are in the same mindset, right? So people that we did the project together with us, people that are from kind of network. And whenever I'm in a conversation, a passionate conversation with them, I'm filled, empowered. I feel that I'm suddenly motivated again. But if I distance myself from the conversation and from the relationship, then there's a part of me that just wants to disengage. So the more I feel that I'm in conversation, the more I have power to actually do.
Thanks, Leor. Yeah, that says a lot, doesn't it, about that that kind of almost binary decision whether to shut down and disengage or how to kind of push through. Yeah, I can relate to that, honestly. I'm not sure. I haven't done that yet. I haven't been able to push through. I'm still feeling really stuck. But I'm hoping, yeah, I'm gradually getting there. Sami, sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, how has your last 5 months been, and how are you doing now, man? And the hope for the future.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for the question, and it's very important to have time to really share and express. And I will say it hasn't been easy at all. When October 7th first hit, when we realized the amount of damage that was created by the attack of Hamas on the outskirts of Gaza, my first reaction was Gaza's going to be destroyed. There is nothing that's going to stop Netanyahu or the Israeli government and military from engaging in a mass slaughter of the people of Gaza. My second reaction was to actually pick up the phone and call my cousin in Gaza. I have family in Gaza, and then trying to find any way to get them out of there, to get them to go to Egypt, anything. And of course, they couldn't. They didn't even have passports at that time. Uh, so it became a very, very personal issue for us. It's my mother's family, my uncle, my aunt, my cousins, their wives, husbands. They all live in Gaza. Uh, so on that personal level, we spend months actually doing everything we can to try to get them out. And then luckily, we were able to get them out just a few weeks ago before the attack, actually a day before the attack on Rafah started. And they were in Rafah waiting to cross out. Um, on a political issue, as a Palestinian, it just continued to be part of that narrative. It was, of course, unexpected, but there is a narrative that as Palestinians we have been suffering for decades under the occupation, under the Nakba that started in 1948. And there was this feeling that this is going to be a strategy to continue to destroy, to dismantle Palestinian resiliency, not even resistance, but resiliency and the Palestinian desire for self-determination in this land. And it was very difficult, especially coming as a person who is committed to peace and nonviolence, to see the level of violence, the unprecedented expression of violence, and I would say from Hamas and from the Israeli military towards the other, where violence becomes the norm, violence becomes the way, violence becomes what is listened to, and that sense of despair that all the work that I've been part of, that we've been doing, and for me, I'm 52 years old, and I started my engagement in nonviolence at the age of 12, and that so all of this work, all of the efforts, all of the energy that we've put, in a sense, has failed, and those who seek violence and believe in violence, their voice is what is being heard globally. And then this is the polarization that Leor was talking about. Just even to see many peace activists on both sides just fall into now we stand with our against the other. Seeing peace activists who have engaged in dialogue work and nonviolence work for so many years find ways to justify the use of violence, find ways to justify the need to increase militarism on the Israeli side in the sense of self-protection, the logic of self-protection, but that self-defensiveness is very offensive in its violence towards Palestinians. So yeah, there was a point of hitting bottom, I would guess, in terms of just despair and then seeing that everything we've done has failed, nothing works here. Uh, and at the same time, I would say the coming out of that bottom was the notion of seeing what happened as a wake up call for us, as people who are committed to nonviolence, as people who are committed to peace in this land, that it is a time for us to look back and look at what we've done, look where we have succeeded, and look where we have failed also in our work. Look where we have not been committed enough, serious enough, engaged enough, ready to put ourselves at risk enough to promote what we believe in, to engage in what we believe in. And I would say specifically within the Palestinian peace community, the Palestinian activist community, one of the things that has happened is space has been created for us to come together, to engage together. Many activists have engaged in medicine work during this time to create space to allow for grief, to allow for release, to allow for creativity and thinking and having conversations about what we need to do as Palestinians. What is the new language we need to develop? What are the new actions we need to develop? How do we now engage with our Israeli partners in a way that also shows that one of the faults, for example, of the peace movement is that we became very symmetrical, very equal in decisions, and to say no, this is the Palestinian struggle for liberation. This is our struggle, and we love your support. We love your solidarity with us, but it's also not a space where we compromise on what we seek as Palestinians. And you have to trust us in these spaces when we as Palestinians decide this is how we feel we need to engage in resistance and in dialogue spaces and so on, and welcome. And it's been amazing to see Israelis that are ready to sit in and hear tough things from Palestinians, not just the kind, nice, let's get along conversations, but no, let's talk about the reality. Let's talk about ideologies that create pain and suffering. Let's talk about how difficult it is for us as Palestinians to even meet with Israelis during this time and during times before, and then for them to welcome that. So I would say my hope in everything that is happening is that there will be an emergence of a new and I would say serious engagement in peace work and nonviolence work. If those who are committed to violence come from that seriousness, then we as people committed to nonviolence need to come from that exact same seriousness and dedication to the tools that we want to bring and offer to our communities.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sami. Yeah. So there's a lot just there. Non-violence, Hilma seems like this naive kind of concept nowadays, especially. But yeah, I remember learning about Gandhi and Ahimsa, and coming from Britain, with the Northern Ireland peace process and looking at what happened in South Africa around that reconciliation. Not perfect now, decades later. This is probably going to take decades to heal, generations to heal. There's something about the past that we need to talk about collectively. It can't be ignored. And yes, it's political. Yes, there's a kind of historical and cultural, but there's also something really personal. I think that's where you two are really connecting, where this work lives and exists, almost on an emotional kind of physical level, and connecting that to the land itself. So can you talk about how you guys first met each other and what the purpose was of your connection, and how that felt to be collaborating with an Israeli and a Palestinian, and kind of what kind of process was that, and how it started to unfold, and peeling back the layers of that relationship and that kind of trust and brotherhood?
You want to
Well,
start?
I'll
Yeah, go
start.
ahead.
Yeah. Uh, to give a little bit of a background from my end, uh, uh, as I said, I grew up and in a family and on a personal level fully committed to peace work and nonviolence. 26 years ago now, I even started an organization called Holy Land Trust, which aimed at promoting nonviolent resistance to the occupation. So my commitment to nonviolence became a life journey. At a certain point in my journey of questioning, understanding, digging deep into the reality of what we live in this land, one of the things I realized, and then this came actually out of a visit that I was asked to be part of. Actually, it was a retreat called the Bearing Witness Retreat that happens in the death camps of Auschwitz and Birkenau. As we know, the Shoah, the Holocaust, that whole experience of the reality that the Jews faced in Europe during the Second World War. In Auschwitz, as a Palestinian activist, I went there to hear the story of the other, to understand the story of the other. But it became much deeper experience for me where I began to see the reality of the other. I actually say that I understood why we live under occupation as Palestinians in Auschwitz. I began to understand the inherited trauma, the inherited fear, the experience of Jews at that time, and of course, as we know very well, centuries leading up to that time, discrimination, marginalization, violence against Jewish communities, that led ultimately to a creation of an ideology that was all about self preservation and self protection, and never again should this happen to us, even though it should never happen to anybody. uh, where where I began to realize that there cannot be peace in this land without addressing the past and understanding that a lot of the motivation of leaders and communities that live in this land on both sides, Palestinian and Israelis, was motivated by the experiences of trauma and fear of the past. Even many people who engage in peace work are engaging in it out of fear of the other, not out of seeing the other as having legitimate equal rights and historic claims to live in this land. We're afraid of you. One day you're going to kill us. One day you'll commit the Holocaust against us, or we're going to commit like all that narrative exists deeply within our communities. This existential fear and threat is so prominent, so present in the consciousness and the mindset of the people here. Even the peace process itself, the Oslo peace process, for me was completely embedded of fear of the other, not justice, not rights, not recognition of atrocities that have been committed. And so for me, I began the journey during that time of saying that we need to engage in healing work. And jumping to that same moment of time where I also had my first experience with plant medicines in Colombia with ayahuasca, completely not related to it. I won't go into that story. It has nothing to do with the politicus, but I experienced something very profound during that time, and that led through different networks. I would say even the spirit of medicine itself to connect me with Israelis who were coming up with a vision that is how do we bring healing work uh, to Palestinians and Israelis through the medicine field. And very quickly, I was excited to be part of that. And that ultimately led me to meeting my brother, Leor, and to begin taking it into a very targeted work. Like instead of the spaces where Palestinians and Israelis sat and drank together, now it was an intention, an invitation to come and sit together for the purpose of dealing with and healing our collective historic traumas that we have inherited.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's a beautiful meeting, and it's, I think, a lifelong partnership ahead as well. And for me, I was kind of, as a neuroscientist in Imperial College and doing psychedelic therapy research, I felt, there's such a powerful tool. And being an Israeli in London, there's such a powerful tool. I wanted to explore its potential for peace building. Also, from my own practices, sitting in rituals being with groups. I felt that there's such a strong potential of community building, communitas, group work that exists in the medicines, that I didn't want to limit myself to the lab anymore. And I started kind of considering the peace building aspect, the community building aspect of psychedelics. And I wanted to move outside of the lab to do that. So I was looking for partners, for Palestinian partners. And Sami Awad's name was there as like this prestigious name that exists in the field. It's like people mention Sami. It's like when I started exploring. And then many people connected me to Antoine, who's Sami's collaborator, mentee. Where they work together a lot. So Antoine Saka. And a lot of directions connected me to Antoine Saka. And then I met Antoine immediately. It clicked. With Sami, it didn't click immediately. It took time. Like it was more like building trust slowly. So I started working with Antoine and Natalie Ginsburg from MAP, and we did this beautiful road trip in the land, interviewing Israelis and Palestinians, drinking ayahuasca together, and hearing lots of strong emotional stories. And in that road trip, we also met Sami a few times and started spending time together. And slowly building trust. I'm not sure he trusted me immediately from the beginning, but slowly building trust. It took even a couple of years or so until we decided to let's work together. Let's create this project together. Yeah.
Beautiful. You've got good taste, Sami. I love that you took your time waiting. There's something about that.
Well, there's something about another Israeli with another peace idea coming to convince us as Palestinians to join them in it.
Yeah.
But it was different with Leor for sure.
Yeah, really. I mean, this is heart-centered work. It really is, and our heart is wounded and covered over by a lot of layers of pain and politics and ideology and othering. So I'm really happy you met and you're doing this work. So what happened next? Because I know there's that quite famous paper from 2021. So when you had that kind of road trip you were talking about. So maybe just go into what that paper was like to research, like with real Palestinians and Israelis drinking ayahuasca together in the underground, in the land of Israel and Palestine, where kind of, can you just talk us through some of those experiences?
Sure, yeah. So in that paper, there were around 30 interviews, 31, and we just heard a lot of stories. For me, it was very emotional. I almost like every interview I cried, and every interview was like deep 2 hours conversations. And suddenly the interviewees spoke about things that are usually they don't speak about, right? And the idea of even speaking about the politics in the realm of medicine was something that they were not easily doing in the beginning, the interviewees, right? Because it's kind of, there's the politics and there's the medicine, and they're not necessarily related. But the project was trying to seek when they are related. And sometimes that looking at that intersection exposed people in sharing things that they don't usually share, right? So it's like very deep emotional, very personal processes. Very hopeful. We heard amazing stories of, this oneness and unity and coming together and breaking identities and connecting on a deep human level. We heard uplifting stories of listening to the other's music and how it penetrates people, right? So it can be the beginning, it creates resistance and fears and triggers to listen to, as Israeli, let's say, to listen to Arabic music. It kind of activates a lot of tension. But once people allow themselves to open up to it, it can be very uplifting and hopeful, right? So it is, if people speak about it as a moment of expansion. So usually they're close to the other, and there's a moment in which there's an expansion that is felt in the space through those relational sharing of music or prayers that exists in those ceremonies. So as if the identity expands or the framework expands, right? You can imagine it's still similar to psychedelic therapy, to the idea of insight, that suddenly frameworks change, and suddenly a recognition of the other is also a change of a framework. And then we heard also stories of collective traumas, visions of collective traumas, seeing the other, becoming the other in the trauma. There's a lot of like the trauma of the land, the bleeding land. There's just like lots of painful stories, traumatic stories, intergenerational, collective, land, that were told us, and were very deep and sad as well, because they kind of bring a lot of the baggage of history. But also with Antoine, when we did the interviews, we already noticed very quickly that we have a critique in a way of the field that we're studying, which was very apolitical. It was very kind of denying the political conversation. So the idea of oneness or harmony can sometimes, that's how I wrote it also later, can serve a status quo, right? So in peace research, you can say the irony of harmony. If you focus too much on harmony, on oneness, on friendship, on kumbaya, on this kind of hippie new age spirit of connecting and friendship, then you might exclude the conflictual voices. You might exclude the Palestinian voices. So if those groups that we studied were mainly organized by Israelis, Palestinians were minorities in them. They were mainly with the Jewish or Israeli music. Then it was harder for the Palestinian to be included in this. They can be included as Arabs or Muslims and bring the prayers and the music, but to bring the national identity into this field, to bring the need for resistance, the need for liberation into the field was a bit harder for them, right? So something was excluded. And I was starting to be curious about these dynamics, but then also listening to stories in which suddenly there were ruptures, revelations, moment in which people got connected, especially to the collective trauma. And that really shifts something in the dynamics of the group. So it can be a revelatory moment that really brings motivation for people to start changing and engaging. So you can imagine the oneness and the harmony and the connection, which are very beautiful. You can imagine them as kind of forces of acceptance and love and connection, and there's no good and bad. There's no Israelis and Palestinians. There's no history. It's like very apolitical force, which is powerful. But then the revelatory, prophetic energy is a force that also is more active and exists also in the field, right? So a revelation that has also this kind of revolutionary energy in it that then motivates people to change and act towards change. So I started kind of being interested in those two energies and how to work with them, how give space to them, because in this intersection that we later created, which is this medicine and politics, sacred activism, then we don't want to just be this like apolitical oneness kind of entity, but we want to see how we can engage also with the medicine work. So I think there's something also that's activating from the medicine work that we started also working with later on in the project we created together.
Thanks, Leor. And Sami, from your perspective, your role, your experience of being part of that, what were some of the things that kind of stood out for you back then?
Yeah, so for me, as Leor said, a lot of these spaces that were created were organized by Israelis, were done inside Israel itself. The majority of the people were Israeli Jews. Their intention was apolitical for their own personal journey, for their own personal experiences. But for me, it was also coming with that intention to engage in the personal work, but also to be present to what can evolve at the political level. Because as I said before, the invitation was from Israelis to begin working together on how can we bring medicine work into peacemaking. This was the initial invitation. So I came with that energy. Of course, I invited many Palestinians to join and to participate in this work. On a personal level, I think we all experienced deep healing work from personal experiences, personal traumas that we have all faced, including some that are connected to the political reality, which, as Leor said, came out during the gathering. But I think it was coming from personal experiences that we as Palestinians or Israelis had in the context of the occupation and the conflict. So for me, it was a time of exploring medicine, engaging in it, discovering it, but also being present to what Leor said, the realities that came out, the visions that came out, the discussions that came out, the connectedness to the oneness that came out in these spaces. And exactly what Leor said, being careful not to be pulled fully into these spaces where, we say, forget about politics. All of this politics doesn't matter. Identity doesn't matter. Nothing matters. We're all one, created as one, knowing fully that the next day we are going to go back into our identity spaces, our collective spaces that are living in a certain lifestyle in a certain way, where those spaces see the other also in a certain way. And so I would say on a personal level, there was I went through the challenge. I went through the challenge of being universal and connecting to all things as one, and the reality that says, no, you are a Palestinian, you live under occupation, you are suppressed, your rights are negated and are denied by the other side. And so there was this battle that was happening in me, like many Palestinians, on how do we connect the two realities in a way, because that experience was very real to us. That connectedness to the oneness is a real experience. And so, in a way, how do we go back and bring and bridge the two together? And I think this is what excited me about the work with Lior, because it was bringing that intention, bringing Israelis with the intention that we are going to bring the political reality and our history of trauma into these settings, and Palestinians having the same, instead of it being more of a sporadic thing that happens in these settings. And so that was the encouragement to say yes, let's do this work.
And so the the work itself is physical. It happens together in ceremony. I don't know whether you have been tracking those folks, those groups, or individually or collectively, to kind of find out like what's been happening, and to compare any data to, like a placebo group. I know this was a different kind of research, but do we know like how these experiences change people, like kind of longitudinally, like from an integration perspective, how are they changing, and are they doing things differently or doing things together as a way of kind of integrating those experiences?
Well, I'll start by saying that I've been involved in a lot of peace work. I keep saying that for decades. But specifically, I've been involved with a lot of groups, a lot of Israeli Palestinian joint spaces, joint groups, organizations, activities, dialogue groups. And honestly, I would say, coming from the experience that we had with medicine, that if not all the participants, many of the participants that went through the experience that we invited them to be in are the closest and are the most connected and are the most understanding of what's happening. And many of them say that they wouldn't be in this space if it wasn't for the experience they had, that we set for them. This the setting and the space we had. And specifically, I would say many Israelis. There were actually a few of them visiting me just a few days ago and talking about next steps, next activities, actions that we want to do. And they were saying that if they were not able to face the collective trauma of the Jewish community and the Holocaust, and to engage in a process of healing it and at least placing it where it belongs, which is not being motivated by it in the present, but understanding that this is a historic experience that we had, the medicine work allowed for that to happen. And they were telling me that if it wasn't for that, they would either be in a militant mindset, going back into the fear, the existential threat, that they all want to kill us. This is what the Nazis did to us, so we need to protect ourselves, or moving into that universal, new age hippie space, which is we don't care about politics, we don't care about the other, we just want to live our life, create our own bubbles, and then have our own little spaces to do more medicine and deal with our interpersonal healing work, and not be disturbed by what's happening from the outside. The space that we created for me allowed for that, exactly what Lior says, bringing the sacredness and spirituality of unity that we all ultimately seek and want, and understand that this is who we are as humans when we completely dismantle identity, and at the same time bringing the political activist component that's coming from a space where I am not motivated by hatred towards the other. I'm not motivated by fear of the other. But in my activism, I'm also motivated by love and compassion and understanding, and seeing where the other comes, that doesn't justify their action, but sees that there is a history, there is a pattern that led to what people do. There is a pattern that led to what Israelis are doing. There is a pattern that led to what Palestinians. Nothing comes out of emptiness, out of space. And I think engaging in the healing work allowed for that to happen. So for me, yes, not all the participants are at that level, but to see some there that are engaging in this conversation at that deep level, for me is a positive outcome of this work.
Thanks, Sami. Yeah, and it feels like part of this is intergenerational healing as well, and trying to really engage with our trauma, like in our body, in our DNA, in our culture, between the other and us and our community, and really trying to feel what that is like and have an and there, not just that one feeling, because that can be quite a prison, and it leads to violence and anger and sometimes self-harm as well as harming the other. So I love the and that you're building onto these dialogues. Leor, can you talk a bit more about the integration, the longitudinal piece, outcomes, and either the data that you have, the conversations that you've been having with people that have been involved in this work, and also some of the future research that you are hoping to do or to publish around this intersection?
Sure. Yeah. So there were 3 groups, and after each program retreat of 9 days, each group was extremely, hope was to the ceiling, right? Like if you look at the hope questionnaires that we measure, hope is like at the top. The feeling of efficacy, power, being empowered, wanting to change, the feeling of community that can do it together. So a group empowerment. All of these questionnaires were extremely high by the end of the retreat. But then it's moves to reality, and hope hits reality, and it's a negotiation. It's not always an easy process, right? So we did have an integration gathering of 3 days, bringing all of the group together, trying to create like a larger community. And there were also, for like around 6 months, there were integration meetings, some on Zoom, some in person. And then now it's 2 years later, there's still meetings, there's still people that lead meetings or organize things together, or just 2 people that do something, and that's their own integration of sorts. So there is a lot of things happening, right, from it. The enthusiasm was much stronger in the beginning, and it's natural for it to kind of like slow down after a while. But I also, and actually after 7th of October, we had one Zoom call, maybe a week or 2 weeks after, with many of the participants coming to it, and I felt it was a very powerful moment of holding each other after the event and kind of like speaking about things, and it really helped ground people, right? So there's still a lot of things happening, a lot of relationships that are for life, for people that are like very close. But I also want to speak to the challenges, of that, because as I see it, our integration was not perfect. We did not know what we're entering and how powerful the process will be once we have this collective intention that everybody are centered around, right? So we speak about integration usually in the personal sense. What does it mean to have a communal integration or integration towards action, right? So we invited all those energies of activism and community. How to integrate them well is a question that I'm kind of still asking, right? Because all this enthusiasm that was happening in the end of the retreat, there was a need to ripple it, right? This is kind of, and now the charity name, the new charity is called Ripples, because I see that as the primary intention of our next phase, is how you support the ripple, So it's not just like in the future, it's not just one retreat. It's actually, let's say, a program of 1 year that has a 2 weeks immersion in it. But people commit for a whole year, knowing that they're holding each other for a whole year before and after, and supporting also that, the ripples that want to come after such encounter together. So what I noticed as well is that when the enthusiasm doesn't have a place to discharge itself in reality, when this kind of big event happens, if you throw a rock to water and something blocks the ripple, then the water can flip on itself in a way, right? So this is kind of the metaphor I'm thinking about. And because the architecture of the Israeli-Palestinian land, the social architecture in the land is enforcing separation, it's really hard to continue this work without really thinking about it, thoroughly in advance. So there's no clear places to meet for Israelis and Palestinians that they feel safe. There are very few of them. It's really hard to create together. Sometimes the mentality of, let's say, boycott from the Palestinian sides create a situation in which even if when people want to work together, they feel that there are forces that separating them from the Israeli and from the Palestinian side. It's really hard to meet. There's a lot of tension from everybody around that just creates more and more and more and more separation. So those group of people that now wants to be connected and act as a community and use this enthusiasm for creation, for activism, for art, for whatever wants to come out, if they are kind of separated, it can create tension in them, right? And I noticed in few people that there was that tension, that, the kind of a shattered dream of sort, we really wanted to do something, and then reality is just way too strong. So this is kind of what I'm contemplating right now. What we're contemplating right now is really how to hold that in the integration. And the things I think that are crucial is, first of all, just a personal integration for whoever needs like a one-on-one psychological support. People who are just need a clearer psychological support for longer term, like with psychedelic therapy. Then there's need for a community integration, the need for holding a space together, holding a community together, having a space as well to meet, is crucial, a physical space. And then it's more the like creative, action-oriented integration, which is how you ripple it out, and how to support those processes of integration. So what we imagine in future groups is that those who attended already the retreats, they're already very motivated to continue to work together. They can hold the space for the new ones, right? So they can create an ecosystem back in the land, that when people return, they return to a culture, they return to a network, they return to to ecosystem that supports that integration. And that is kind of happening. We're part of a network. We're not just an independent project. We are part of like a group of people that have similar projects and support each other and empower each other. And I think that thing is emerging, and I would like to support it much more.
Yeah, thank you, Leor. Just with the legality of psychedelics and underground ceremonies, that enough makes this kind of project really hard. Just talking about it, bringing people together, finding each other. And then, with everything that is going on here, it's deep extra layers of complexity. So it's really hard. But I love how you're designing ripples to kind of, to build that out, and almost to have a way for local leaders and community organizations perhaps to kind of use ripples almost like a bit of a hub, to get empowerment, to get hope, to get skills, to get healing, and then to go back into the communities and ripple that out. So therefore it can help the situation here with Israelis and Palestinians, and it can also help other people in other countries with conflict on this kind of national level, but simply just around very difficult conversations that where there is polarization, and conflict between political parties or races, or so many different conflicts, I think, that are just bubbling under the surface that just go on for generations. And that is healing, and that is revolution, where those kinds of breaking through those barriers is what we need. But I just see something that I want to turn this into a question. People, like you were saying, Sami, want to save the world. They want to bring peace to Palestinians and Israel and kind of live happily ever after. And it's very easy to kind of glamorize it, to kind of minimalize the complexity of this. Do we have that same problem with psychedelics? And let's just sprinkle some ayahuasca in there or some MDMA in there. Everything's going to be okay, guys, you know. And I love Rick Doblin and his enthusiasm, his optimism, and, you know, having kind of a trauma-free world by 2070. I'm not so hopeful about that, but I feel like, how do we stay grounded in, like, what the fuck do we do right now with people around the world and these people here with where we are fighting, where we're afraid to talk, where I can't go to your house, Sami, because I'm scared. I'd fucking love to. And you're welcome in my house. How do we get to that level where it's not psychedelics that are going to heal the world? We just need to sit down, hug, cry, talk. And I don't want you to heal my trauma. That's my job. And you're doing a good job on your own work. But what's just the granular level that we can just start this process?
Yeah. I mean, I want to say, just to that last point you said, I'm responsible for my trauma. I think one of the discussions that's coming out of the people who were in this project is, how do we create that sense of we are responsible for our people and the work that needs to happen with our people? And that was a big part of the discussion that happened in the last meeting we had. How do we support the other in creating space for their own people to go through the journey of healing? That it's not my responsibility as a Palestinian, and it's not your responsibility as a Jew or an Israeli, but there is this understanding that my liberation actually depends on your healing. And your ability to live in peace and security depends on my healing as well. And so that intersection is very important to come back to continuously. And I fully agree. You know, when anybody, I grew up in a very, very Christian setting where there was only the way, the one way. And if you don't believe in this way, you're going to burn in hell. And one thing I learned is to rid myself of that sense. And so, as much as I love the work with psychedelics and medicine and see the importance of it, I fully acknowledge that it is not the way, the only way, and everybody needs to do it to reach that level. We all know very well that these medicines have also been used and abused for ideologies that promote separation and hatred, and bringing people together to believe in certain things that in them are embedded discrimination and racism against others. So it's a tool. It's not the way. And there are many tools and many ways to achieve peace and justice in this land. But for me specifically, I also see that, again, I would say it, we need leaders, we need activists, we need visionaries that are not motivated by, and more important, do not manipulate our past experience to achieve their own political ideologies. Fear cannot be the motivation for peacemaking. Fear cannot be the motivation for security. And fear cannot be the motivation for liberation as well. And so, for me, how do we cultivate, how do we achieve, how do we build that generation of leaders on both sides that are able to really see and recognize and acknowledge each other as equal in this land? That we all have a history in this land and we all have a future in this land. And this future cannot at all exist with one group uh, feeling and seeing itself as a better collective than the other. On either side, I mean, you know, it's who has the power now that's deciding this. But the tables can flip at any time, and we don't want this to happen. We don't want to create a new generation of traumatized Palestinians that inherit the collective trauma of the aftermath of October 7th, and that becomes their motivation and how they lead the Palestinian people and how they relate to others. As sadly, I think what happened during the Holocaust, because there wasn't a deep process of deep healing and reconciliation, the Holocaust became a tool that has been used and abused by politicians to embed fear and to use it and abuse it for their own political and ideological goals. And so for me, whatever tool that we use, and yes, psychedelics is one tool. It's a very powerful tool. It goes deep, but there are many tools that we have also used, and there are tools that we introduced also in the project itself that people were beginning to understand in a very deep way how their personal life is completely determined by the collective, and how the collective influences the personal, and the cycle that goes around, and for them to be able to step out of it. And so for me, peacemaking, I would say now, is not about reaching agreement. It's not about reaching an accord or a solution. It is about that deep work that needs to happen, the foundation that needs to happen. And this is where I am hopeful. This is where I believe that, in the midst of what's happening now, we are all coming back to our trauma bodies, our trauma experiences, our fear bodies. But I really believe, and maybe hope more than believe, that at some point Israelis and Palestinians will wake up to the reality of what happened after the dust settles and say, we cannot do this again. We cannot allow for this to happen again. We cannot allow for another 30,000 Palestinians to be killed in such ways again. This is what I want Israelis to say, and Palestinians to begin to say, we need to wake up and understand that armed resistance, violence has not achieved anything for us. And so we need different ways. It is not about non-resisting, but it's also resisting in ways that allow for the other to see the humanity of who we are, allow to see the injustice of what they're doing and how their own government and military is behaving. And nonviolence is not easy, as we said. It's not. Nonviolence takes a lot of courage, takes a lot of guts, takes a lot of dedication, takes a willingness to sacrifice. Uh, and I really believe that there will be a wake up call that will happen for Israelis and Palestinians that will say we need something new, and hopefully we would be in a position at that time, if it's in the underground work that we're doing or the above ground work that we do, to be a resource for people to say, okay, we're here to have tools for you to create that new vision together.
Thank you, Sami. Yeah. Yeah, in the Jewish world, we have that concept of never again from the Holocaust. And yeah, I connect with that now, like never again for this experience between us on this land, just never again. And when you said those words, my liberation depends on your healing, and we're all in the same situation, that was, wow. Yeah, really powerful. Leor, I just wanted to check in with you and see what's coming up for you.
No, I'm good. I don't have anything to add to this.
Okay. Leor, I've got a related question about some of your previous work around emotional breakthroughs. And I think you developed the emotional breakthrough inventory, and you taught about that in our Vital course. I'm curious what the three of us are talking about here around our own individual healing of trauma, around kind of realizations we have around the other. Would they be emotional breakthroughs? Like, does this kind of fit within that model and those kinds of experiences that people have, particularly when using psychedelics?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually, for the project, I kind of developed an emotional breakthrough inventory for this purpose, for collective trauma, for conflict, right? And so we have questionnaires about people's experiences. How cathartic were they? How much was their emotional release, cry, grief processing that took place in the retreats in Spain? So, and definitely that was very high. So there was a lot of that emotional release happening. And I want to say, maybe add to that I now see breakthrough in general as like a reoccurring theme in different layers of psychedelic work, right? So it's like there's an emotional breakthrough, a cathartic moment. There are cognitive breakthroughs, insights. There are visions, which are revelations, but they're like a breakthrough of sorts. Something new is revealed. You see the world in a different way. There is, as I said, the recognition, the moment of which you open your framework to the other. It can be a very strong, powerful moment. It's an event, right? It's not a slow process. There's a breakthrough moment in which you suddenly realize something about the person, or the person as a culture in front of you, right? The kind of background of the person. So there's a moment of recognition. And then even this kind of larger revolutionary spirit that sometimes exists with those medicines is a sort of social political breakthrough. You know, there's a moment of which there's an excitement and breaking through specific frameworks and social structures. So I do see that idea of breakthrough in different layers, and it usually has an emotional quality of opening, right? It can be even when it's a cathartic cry of grief, I think there's some level of hope, openness, satisfaction when that is happening, right? It's kind of like a release of sort that can happen on many different layers and has an emotional quality. So yes, also working with collective trauma, also working with the recognition of the other, intercultural exchanges, international exchanges in the space have their breakthrough moments.
Yeah, thanks, Leor. Yeah, that's very relevant. And even just thinking about political breakthrough, feeling like changes of leadership, local level leadership, but also, national level and kind of multinational leadership on an advocacy level. Like what kind of paradigm are we living in right now? When we just start to expand it, we look at, all the countries around the world and kind of trading who's on what side. Mm-hmm. It's really hard not to get into that fear of what's going to happen next. So I feel like the emotional breakthrough can lead to political breakthrough. And I wanted to touch base around the work that you've been doing in Spain, I think. I know it's not published yet, but can you just talk more about what that vision is and kind of how you're hoping that kind of unfolds from here?
Sami, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, everything that we've mentioned so far is coming out of the Spain work that we've done. So the three groups that Leor talked about were ones that met in Spain. We did the work with them in Spain. One of the things is, as Leor said, there's a lot of learning that we have been doing and will continue to do from that. I guess we could call it a pilot project of some sorts. It was we jumped into a space that, as far as we know, hasn't been done before. Bringing two conflicting groups of people together in such a way, with such intention, with such medicine, dealing with collective work, not just individual work. We kind of broke the standards of what the Western approach to medicine also said, that it's only for your personal healing work, and to say, not connecting it with how indigenous people do it as communal work with medicine, bringing it together was very powerful. And like Leor said, everybody was on such a high, including us, maybe as holders and facilitators, who were just on cloud nine once this was done, and coming back to the reality, and then deeply understanding the importance of integration at a deeper level than what we did, and the follow-up on a personal level. So the work will continue. This is something that we believe in, many participants believe in, even participants who stepped out of the space for whatever reason, personal reasons, or too overwhelmed with the political reality, fully support that this work needs to continue, that there was depth in it, there was levels in it that they had not reached. It's a space where there are no elephants in the room. When you are with the medicine, you have nothing to hide, and when you are in a container that builds trust and respect for whatever emerges, and the level of care and support that people gave to each other in that space, it is something that, again, in my years of activism, I never experienced, let alone just held space in. So we see this work as important. We will continue it. There's a lot of um, things we need to add to it, things we need to clear in it, things we need to enhance in it. Like Leor said, instead of this, we had a lot of also pre and post of the Spain project. The Israelis came into the West Bank and did visits to see the reality of how Palestinians live. That was very important. But now we're saying that we need more of this. We need to create a longer preparation program and then doing the ceremonies, and definitely a longer integration program and follow-up program, and creating spaces where people can come together and be together and create together. I think the momentum is heading in the right way. It is not easy. I would say, as a Palestinian, this is definitely not easy, because this is not just underground; it's absolute taboo to engage in this work. Uh, so, so, and this is why for us, in the last meeting we said, let's begin, even if we begin with Israelis coming and doing this work for the collective healing of the Jewish community, which is important no matter what we need to do. Let us begin this work, and let us begin to see what we could cultivate also on the Palestinian side for the work that needs to happen here. So yeah, we will continue to move forward, and I'm excited to be part of this. Excited to be part of Ripples in this work, and to see again. We're not waving a magic wand and saying this is it. We know it's difficult. We know it's not easy. We know it's not guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed, but we feel very, very strong. Again, I would say that this commitment to addressing the past in such a way is for me key for any peacemaking that needs to happen in the future.
Hmm. Thanks, Sami. I love that you're saying that this isn't a magic wand and kind of, we are not the solution. I saw on the website, and the website also had maybe like 15 kind of values and principles of Ripples, which are awesome. I kind of tempted to read them all out, but sacred activism is there, and particularly chaos to magic, which is a little bit like that never again. Like, this is chaos. Like, literally what we've seen the last 5 months is, doesn't get much worse than this. This is horrific. So, without waving a magic wand, let's do something with that, and not give up, and find kind of seeds of hope to plant there. I wanted to ask maybe a technical question around.
Maybe
Yeah,
can I just add
go ahead,
something, because I want to
Sure.
kind of maybe Sami also to explain about something, but just a bit more details about the Spain, because it's kind of vague what we're actually did there, except of the ceremonies. So I just want to say there were other facilitators as well. Armel Lehman, Israeli facilitator, Indius Brazil, a Brazilian facilitator, another Palestinian woman who prefers not to identify, who was another facilitator. But there was a lot of intention for participatory framework, right? So we really wanted to create ceremonies which people bring their own music, prayers, dance, activities to the whole program as well, and into the ceremonies. So there was a very participatory ethos, and experimental ethos almost, of like, we're doing it together, right? We're trying things together. We're playing around with different ideas of how to integrate, with how to hold space, and the groups were really part of the creation, right? But I think there's strong intention of like aligning sacred activism, so where the political and the personal meet. That was a lot in the preparation. So going to the West Bank, seeing refugee camps, seeing the separation wall. So it's embodying the politics. It's not just what you read in the news. When you're there next to the separation wall, as an Israeli, it's a completely different thing than reading about the occupation in the news, right? It's really embodies it. It aligns the politics with the personal. And the most important practice we did in the retreats was something that Sami brought, called the spiritual questionnaire, that we spent a few days before the first ceremony actually engaging in that. And I see it as a practice that was really bringing the politics from that kind of chat, verbal ideas and opinions realm into something which is way more personal and embodied. And maybe Sami, you can speak a bit about that, how that affected the project and the program.
Yeah, without going too detailed into it, the spiritual questionnaire is a tool, like Leor said, that connects the personal and the collective together, but being expressed through a very personal story, sharing, and experience of the person, where a space that allows for deep sharing and transparency and vulnerability to happen. People sharing deep stories, deep experiences connected to the conflict or connected to their personal journeys, in a listening circle that is fully honoring them and loving them and holding them in that sharing. and that space and the questions that are asked by the facilitator and the discussions that are created around it and the mirrors that are given by the participants for the person who shares, for us, I think, and we agree, for Philip, this created the level of intimacy to go into the ceremony, where that level of intimacy and vulnerability and transparency carried on in the ceremony itself, that we feel it was such a key component of it, that it's not just about let's bring Palestinians and Israelis to sit and drink together. These people knew each other in such intimate ways before the medicine, and the fears and the traumas that were expressed in the spiritual questionnaire. One of the main questions is, what is your biggest fear when it comes to the conflict, to the reality that we live in? Not the political story, you on a personal level. What brings you angst? What makes you hesitate to get out of bed when it comes to the reality that we live in? And for people to be able to share that and the stories around that in such a deep way, and then bringing it into the medicine, I think was amazing. And yeah, I want to say the word miracle, miraculous, for what it allowed to create in these in the ceremony itself.
Yeah, I love that we're talking about that bit, because obviously preparation, integration is always important for our healing and opening up parts of ourselves that maybe are lost or stuck or contain a lot of energy. But when we're talking about this kind of work, gosh, the preparation needs to be really well considered and developed and patient. And so I love that, in a sense, you're preparing the ground between each other of kind of intimacy and a vulnerability there. And that probably wouldn't happen if there wasn't that group container, if it was just one person and a therapist, or one person with some homework to complete, via email, like, oh, here's a questionnaire. Go, fill that in and then send it back, and then I'll see you for your ketamine session next week. That wouldn't bring that vulnerability. It doesn't prime that container and that heart space to be able to begin opening up. I got one little question. I'm interested if you have any thoughts around the medicine itself. Were there any other medicines other than ayahuasca that you've seen being used between Israelis and Palestinians, or is it pretty much all ayahuasca drinking circles? And what do you think about, would it be any different if it was, say, psilocybin, or maybe even something like more kind of grown on the land itself, like mescaline containing cacti, or Syrian rue, which kind of has grown here in ancient times, so, and that has psychedelic potential? Yeah, any thoughts around that?
I think all are welcomed, but the choice, I think, for ayahuasca, at least to start with, ayahuasca is not just a substance, or any substance is not just a substance. It's also a culture and a practice, right? So working with ayahuasca is working with a ritual, is working with a music, is working with social, cultural milieu of people, right? And entering into that, and also bringing something into that space, and being in dialogue with that space. It has its music, it has ways of holding space, it has a practice that is way more developed in the collective sense, right? Say it's a group practice, right? Psilocybin are used in groups, but right now the cultural association of it is the psychedelic therapy, the personal kind of healing thing. They can be used in group, but that's not how they're mostly used. They're used in retreats, but even in retreats, it's more for like personal inner work. You go as a group, but you do relatively personal inner work. And with ayahuasca, there's also this a bit of a collective intention, of like you can sit, you can sing together, you can do all of those things as part of the practice. So I think there's that choice as well, which is not exactly just the substance on a biological level. And then there would be great also to work with MDMA and pathogens. In the beginning, I was collaborating with MAPS, and they were obviously, wanting to do more MDMA. And I'm very open now to doing that. Group work with MDMA can be very powerful and really opening, and also opening more of the verbal communication during the sessions, right? So MDMA or even San Pedro and the cacti can be used in a way that opens the verbal communication. So I'm aware now of a group of Israelis that processing the current events, and they met and they did San Pedro together and opened up and sharing their process right now. And it can be very powerful. Yeah. So LSD as well can be very powerful. So I'm not all medicines are welcomed, but the choice for ayahuasca is definitely the choice of a ritual and a practice and a culture to work with.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to this and say I fully agree. And then part of what we're looking into, just like what Leor said, is how do we bring in and integrate different medicines based on what is the experience that we're looking for and based on the intention and the results that we're wanted to create and the integration that's going to come out of it. So it's not just like a cocktail of medicines, but to really understand that there is each medicine has its specific purpose and intention and outcome that happens. And how do we bring those into the space? The research was done specifically for ayahuasca in the Spain project, but we all agree that yes, other medicines will also be used for different explorations and healing work that needs to happen.
Great answers. Thank you, guys. Before we close out, are there any things that you wanted to cover that we haven't really gone into yet or in sufficient detail?
I mean, one thing I want to go back to, and I think it's a point mentioned earlier, is there is this over glorifying uh, any work that's peace work, but specifically within the psychedelic community, this work. And for me, it's very important to reiterate uh, the dangers, the risks, the putting ourselves out when it comes to this work, and the level of support that we need from people that are is not just tapping us on the back and say good job, you're inspiring us, great, we're part of this community because we do psychedelics as well. We need a level of support and engagement and seriousness and solidarity with this that is unprecedented. That people we want to invite people to really invest, put time, effort, energy, finance in supporting this work here, and not for their own personal glory and for their own personal showing off, that this like to really come into this work with the humbleness and the seriousness of what it presents. Because it's one of those things that we also fully believe that if we are able to create a beginning of a ripple in this land, in moving for healing and peace and justice and reconciliation, then we all know if it can happen here, it can happen almost anywhere else. The level of hatred, the level of fear, the level of resentment, the level of mistrust is deeper here than any place in the world. And if we are able to create change here, then this can become the new revolution for collective work, for collective peace work, where that Rick Doblin's vision can actually become a reality. To say in 2070, but it needs seriousness around this, and this is what we want to invite people to, and especially I would say specifically the people who are engaged in psychedelic work and medicine work and group work, to really see the potential of collective peace work that can come out of the work that we are doing here.
Thanks, Sami.
Yeah, maybe I just want to strengthen some things here, right? So people can engage with the project with this kind of dream part of it, the naive part of it, or they can also criticize the project, and from the same kind of stereotyping. But I think in the project we are, and when I just heard Sami speaking, I really felt that we're holding both the dream and the critique and grounding it, right? If it's too grounded, we're just fall into despair. If it's too dreamy, it's like way naive and not really engaging, right? So I really think that a dream is something to hold. A dream is something that motivates people. It's not something to be shy of, to work off like with a bit of naivety in order to strive for something that that is a bit more hopeful from what is around. And I think operating in that visioning, dream, revolutionary spirit that is exciting is okay. I really want to say it's okay to work with those energies and be motivated by them, and still be rational and grounded, and and know all the limitations of what you do.
Yeah, and hope comes from that, the meeting of those two. And I think psychedelics are perfect as that kind of boundary crossing between realms and between the dream and between the practical. Like, let's just get shit done. Beautiful. All right, thank you. I want to see the websites, the organizations that you can tell folks about if they want to hear more, if they want to get more information about the kind of the work that you're doing. Where would you direct them to? Leor, feel free to go first.
I think checking the talk, because we didn't publish yet, but checking the talk me and Sami gave in Denver in psychedelic science, I think it's a very fun. I really enjoyed it. It was like really a peak moment, just sharing the stage together and presenting it. And it was before 7th of October, so maybe the enthusiasm and excitement were stronger. So I think that's a good place. And the website Ripples Alliance, which is still small because the charity is not. So now it's a nonprofit that seeks for the charity commission. So it's in the process to be approved, but it's still a place that we start working right now. So the website Ripples Alliance is another place for information.
Thanks, Leor. Any other organizations or ways to get in touch with you, Sami?
No, through Ripples, people can get in touch with me through my email, sami@holylandtrust.org. I still hold the email. So Sami, SAMI @holylandtrust.org. People can also get in touch with me or with Leor as well. We're in this together.
Yeah, my email, feel free to, anybody who wants to get in touch, to contact my Exeter email. Yeah, l.roseman@exeter.ac.uk.
All right. Thank you.
And David, I want to invite you to come and visit me. If you're so near, let's break that barrier.
Yeah, I would love to. Honestly, Sami, I need to, mate.
Let's make it happen.
Yeah.
Definitely when Leor comes, but also before, you're welcome to.
Beautiful. Yeah, I would. That would mean the world to me, and you are welcome here, both of you guys, to my home. And yeah, let's just take these kind of ripples of hope, and not give up and keep spreading them out. So thanks for your work. Amazing pioneers and believers, grounded in the reality that we need to feel and see in each other, and first within ourselves. So just blessings to you and your work. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.